Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lysha and I'm the owner of Lysha Be Creative. Today's tutorial is this cute little water bottle design. It is a cheer themed tumbler, a custom order that I took, and I thought this was a perfect opportunity to show you guys how to do a V-split look on water bottle tumbler. So of course, everything I use will be listed in the description, but let's go ahead and jump right into today's tutorial. So we're going to go ahead and start with these 18-ounce Duo Hydro Sport bottles. So I got these from Hog. I have a link for them down in the description box. And so these are smaller water bottles. They're only 18 ounces, but perfect for like those that, work out or for, kids sports and things like that. So this was the kind of perfect design water bottle style for this order. So these tumblers do come with two lids. One is like sort of the typical Hydro Sport water bottle that comes with the straw, and then the other just screw on lid. So both of them do screw on, and that's super important to know before you get into doing any sort of tumbler, because you want to make sure that things line up. And we'll talk about that sort of as we get to lining things up with tape. But the first thing I want to do is I want to sort of tape off the threads of the tumbler to ensure sort of where my epoxy is going to stop every time I epoxy this tumbler. So I'm starting with a bit of electrical tape here, just covering up the threads and creating a nice straight line where I want my epoxy to stop when I epoxy these tumblers. So I've gotten both of those taped off, and I'm going to leave the tape on there, but now I'm going to go ahead and get this sanded and prepped. So I'm going to now take that opportunity to scuff up this surface, making sure to kind of remove that glossy coating from the manufacturer, and then wipe these both down with 91% rubbing alcohol and a paper towel. Of course, you guys know you could certainly take them inside and wash them off with dish soap and water as well. So once these are both cleaned, they're all prepped and ready to go, I'm going to take the time to sort of tape these off for the V-split look that we're going to be doing. So for this, before I can go ahead and get started, I need to go back and grab the lids out of the box. Doesn't matter which lid because they'll both line up like they should, but I want to put the lids back on because I need to use those to determine where the sort of center of the cup is going to be. Worst case scenario, and I've done this multiple times, if you don't take the time to put the lids back on, or you just forget, which I have done, and you go to put the lids back on after everything's done, most likely your cup is not going to line up and it's going to look super wonky. So be sure that when you're working with a cup that has a screw-on lid, make sure that you either mark off where that front center is with, a marker or something, or put the lid on before you sort of start to tape things off. So I'm going to go ahead and just use 1-inch blue painter's tape here to create my V-split look. So this is like a double V-split kind of look, I guess you could say, and how it'll look in sort of its final look, because we'll separate that center section with a little piece of vinyl as well. But I'm going to use this tape now just to sort of separate out how this is going to lay out and look, and kind of give me an idea, where my spray paint and things are going to go. So now that they're both taped off, we're going to take this over to our spray tent. So I'm using a combination of a flat black spray paint and stiletto from Colorshot, and we're going to go ahead and get this spray painted. So I'm only going to show you me spray painting one. I'm starting with the bottom, and that's where the black is going to be. It's going to be a very sort of deep ombre, if you will. There's going to be only a bit of black on the bottom, and then the rest of the cup that is not taped off is going to be red. So we're going to go back in after we've applied the flat black and go over all of the rest of the stainless steel with the stiletto red. Once I've gotten this spray painted to my liking, I'm going to let these dry, and then we'll come back and go ahead to get ready to, of course, add our glitter. So we're going to be using multiple glitters for this. Of course, you guys know anytime I'm doing any sort of ombre, I really want to make sure that I am getting sort of a lot of definition and a lot of dimension. And so now that we're back with these cups all dried, we're going to get into sort of layering these different glitters. So I'm starting, of course, with the Epoxy Method, and the glitters I'm going to be using is Dogs in 1776 from Peachy Olive, and then Michelson from Batty Glitter. So I'm going to add a bit of epoxy to the bottom of my cup. And this is my favorite way to apply glitter. I've talked about this before. You guys often will see me use something like Mod Podge, or you've seen me recently be using One Coat Wonder from Cal and Grace Designs. But my favorite way to apply glitter, hands down, is always going to be epoxy. I don't always have the opportunity to use epoxy for glittering, mostly because I'm either pressed for time and I want to make sure that I can get this on the turner quickly, or it's just a not wanting to mix epoxy. I usually will do Epoxy Method glitter with like leftover epoxy from projects that I've already put epoxy on my turners, and then use the extra to glitter any cups that I have ready to go. And this is sort of what I did on this day. So I'm just going to apply, again, a thin layer of epoxy to the cup. You don't want to have too much epoxy on your cup when you're doing Epoxy Method glitter application, excuse me, because then you'll get a lot of pooling and your glitter will start to sort of swirl in directions you don't want to. So you want to have enough that there's like a slip to the cup, but not so much that, if you were to leave this cup, standing in the stand, that the epoxy would start to pool downward or upward. That is what you don't want. So anywhere from 2 to 5 mLs, and usually more if you are more towards 5 mLs if you're going to be using mostly chunky glitter, because you want to sort of give more surface area for the glitter to stick to. But for finer glitters, you want a really thin coat, usually less than 2 mLs of epoxy on your cup for that kind of application. So we're going to be layering. So I'm usually using anywhere from about 3 to 4 ml, since we'll be layering different sort of size cuts of glitter here to be able to get the overall look we're going for. So with the epoxy added to our cups, I'm going to go ahead and start glittering. We're going to start with the bottom. I like to start sort of bottom to top, but we're going to go in with dogs. So dogs is a combination of like square cut red and some black glitter. And so I thought this would be perfect for the bottom, because then I wouldn't have to work so hard to try and blend a black into red with such a small cup to work with. So this was kind of like the perfect sort of cheat, if you will, to give me the look that I wanted without having to spend a lot of time having to perfect the ombre with such a small portion of an ombre needing to be shown. So we're going to cover this bottom section with that dogs on both of these cups before we move into the next glitter. So for the sort of main portion of the cup, I pulled 2 reds. So I'm going to use both Michelson and 1776. They are definitely different shades of red. Michelson is definitely more of a deep red, reminds me of like Valentine's Day colored red, but it's a chunky mix, which is what I want. And then the 1776 is definitely more of a like Crayola crayon red, I guess you could say, or what I think of when I look at like the red crayon out of a Crayola box. And it has some holographic sparkle, which is just going to add to the overall look of the cup. So I'm starting with Michelson because that's a chunkier look, and I want to sort of layer the rest of that cup with that color to pick up some dimension and add more sparkle. When you have different cuts of color on your cup, you're going to notice that it seems to be that it's more sparkly than a cup that has one cut of glitter on it. I don't really know what the science is behind it, but I promise you it is very much true. And then of course I'm going to go back over both cups. And now's my opportunity to really try and blend into the dogs at the bottom with 1776. So with this finer cut of glitter, this is how I'm going to make sure that all of my epoxy is completely covered, that I don't have any spots that don't have any glitter on the cup where there's epoxy, and really make sure I'm getting full coverage at this point. So this is kind of where you can just let your glitter flow. Continue to add glitter all over that sort of empty canvas to ensure that all the epoxy is completely covered. Once I'm satisfied with the glitter and how much is covered on the cup, I'm satisfied with the blend and all, I'm going to go ahead and tap this off with some scissors, just removing any glitter that was not actually stuck, and then pick up my glitter so that we can sort of push this glitter down. So because I'm using different chunky glitters, I wanted to make sure that I had a real smooth surface to work on. I do this with all water bottles, even if anything I'm adding glitter to, if it's like the water bottle style cups, because typically the sort of troublesome spots of these cups is the top rim, right, and the bottom edge. So because they have sort of that not really rounded bottom, it's more squared off than some of the other cup styles, I really like to roll my glitter, to roll my cup in like parchment paper to make sure that all my glitter lays flat and I don't have to apply so many coats of epoxy over top to get a smooth finish. So of course, after I'm done rolling my cup and flattening the glitter, we can go ahead and remove the painter's tape that was covering up that center section. And so of course, right now this is going to be all stainless steel, but we'll come back and paint that after these have cured. So I did use an artist cure to apply my epoxy because I needed more work time since I was using a glitter in 2 cups instead of 1. So I let this dry for about 6 hours before it was good to come back and add our chalk paint. So now we're back and we haven't done anything with the cup other than let them dry. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to paint the center section. So if you really wanted to, you probably could just tape this off really carefully and go back to spray paint. But I didn't really want to take that chance and accidentally remove any of the glitter when I removed the tape. You could then also epoxy and then come back and spray paint that section if you were worried about pulling up like the glitter that's already there. But for me, it just makes more sense to just use paint in these sections. And although it's a little bit annoying because you do have to apply a couple coats of like your glue, whatever you're going to be using, especially if you're using a color like white, which can pick up all those different streaks underneath with the paint. I definitely feel like it's worth it than trying to, you know, spray paint this small section and get everything to work. So I'm going to go in with a chalk paint. I like to use chalk paint because acrylic paint and white typically will take me like 4 to 5 coats. Chalk paint only takes me usually 1 or 2 coats to get a nice smooth finish without having it look super streaky. And so I let both of those coats dry on both cups, and then we'll come back and add a layer of Mod Podge over top to then apply our glitter. So now we're just Mod Podging our areas, and so I'm going to do this in sections. It just makes more sense for me to try and do like one side of the V split than the other because I don't want my Mod Podge to dry on me before I've applied the glitter in those sections. So just taking this sort of straight edge paintbrush, applying that glue over top of the white paint, then going back over the painted section of Mod Podge with Escobar from Batty Glitter. So this is like a fine white glitter. It's a true white, I would say. It has just that beautiful sort of sparkle that comes from a typical white glitter, but it is fully white, very true white. So if you're looking for one of those in like a fine glitter, which I think everybody should have a fine white glitter because you can add that to absolutely anything, this is definitely one to go ahead and grab up. So now I've just gone ahead and done the other side of the V split here. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing with the other cup. And then we'll put these on the turner. So these did go on the turner for 3 coats of epoxy. I did use artist cure for this, so I did tape that off, and I am going to show you the epoxying process. When I came back, I did fail to record me adding all of the vinyl lines, but essentially what I did is what you guys have seen me do before. I applied some washi tape along the edges of the white strip, and then in the center I put a thicker black strip and then a white strip down the center. So I just wanted to sort of break it up so it looks like a double V split at the end of the day, but I just literally created that with just different washi tapes and strips of vinyl. So now we're on to applying decals, and I got all of these decals from Etsy, so I'll link those down in the description box. So again, this is a cheer themed tumbler, so I decided to have like a cheer girl on the front, and then we'll have the sort of pom-pom and name on the back end. So I did do an offset of all of the decals aside from the name, just to ensure that this really did pop. I wasn't sure if like the silver would sort of disappear. I felt like it would look kind of flat if I didn't have the offset. So I did a super close offset. So you'll notice that like really it's probably like 0.5, I would say, of an offset around the decals. I didn't want it to be too big and sort of take over, but enough to just make it look like it's the outline. So I layer the decals before I apply them to the cup. The back is going to have where the little pom-pom is going to go. I kind of was trying to decide how this is going to go, but there's also a name going here. So that's why I'm kind of putting it closer to the left side as opposed to putting it directly in the center on the back, because that name is going to kind of take up that other section. That way it looks like it's centered on the back section of the cup. So once I've gotten those 2 decals added, I'm now going to come back and add my name decal right next to the little pom-pom and horn thing. I don't know what they call this. I was never a cheerleader, so if you know, you can let me know in the comments, but I cannot remember what this is called. So I'm going to add the name there that, again, I didn't do an offset for. I'm going to reverse weed any of those little fine sections of vinyl that I couldn't get up earlier. And then I'm going to do the exact same process with the second cup. So I'm not going to drag you through that. We're going to kind of speed through this next decal application because it's the exact same thing. The only difference is that I'm adding a different name. And I didn't add anything from Cricut today. I kind of had been staying away from adding things from Cricut because it's kind of a pain in the butt. But if there are things that you guys want to see me do in Cricut Design Space when it comes to decals, let me know and I will find a better way to showcase some of that stuff in my videos. So once all the decals are applied, I know that foil vinyl or like metallic vinyl of any sort can be a real pain in the tush when it comes to final coats of epoxy and repelling and things. So I want to make sure that I seal this. Now, there are 2 options for sealing: Mod Podge, which you're seeing me use right now, or polyacrylic from Minwax. Okay. So those are my 2 go-tos. 9 times out of 10, I'm using polyacrylic. This time and a couple other times I've been using Mod Podge, and it kind of just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. I do think that polyacrylic dries cleaner, if that makes sense, dries crisper, if that makes any sense. But Mod Podge is also great to use as well. So you don't have to go out and pick up Minwax polyacrylic, but if you are someone who you know, already has that, you know, you can continue to use that. But if you don't and would rather use Mod Podge, that's also the alternative. So now we're back on the turner. I'm applying both of my cups to my turner here. I always get a lot of questions on how I put, like, what inserts I use to get my tumblers on the turner. And I just use the giant foam pieces. I get them from Amazon. I'll link those in the description box as well. I need a few new ones for sure, but I just squeeze those in there. They're usually pretty easy to get in and out. It's the only thing that I have found works and keeps my water bottle tumblers on the turner at all times. So I definitely recommend these. Something that's really squishy and going to fill up most of the cup inside. That way you can ensure it also is going to stay straight on the tumbler, especially if you're using the heavier water bottles. So I'll also link those down in the description box. So now I'm just taking my blue painter's tape and we're going back around that section at the top to protect those threads and make sure we don't get any epoxy on those. We of course will remove those at the end, but I want to protect those before I go into my first of 2 final coats of epoxy. So now we're going to go ahead and get our turners rolling. I'm going to mix up epoxy, and I did I'm doing 3 cups here, but I would say that each of the cups probably had anywhere from 20 to 25 for their first of final 2 coats. So, you know, you could measure out that much if you want. So between the 2 of them, it was 50 mLs to get the first of 2 final coats done. So this is my epoxying process. I've talked about it in a couple other videos before. I don't usually show the epoxying process because it's very redundant. It's something that is just part of the process, and I feel like it's not always so fun to watch. But I know that sometimes, especially if you're newer or maybe you're struggling with adding your epoxy, sometimes it's good to see how other people apply their epoxy. I apply with a gloved hand. The tips that I would definitely recommend for any epoxies is I find that warming one part of my epoxy, I typically warm my part A, is my benefit. It helps sort of, especially with thicker epoxies, it really helps to ensure that your epoxy, when you're mixing it, that you're not getting hand cramps, number 1, but also that things end up being more thoroughly mixed. So I warm part A, and I don't do anything fancy. I literally take a larger cup of hot water and set my epoxy bottle inside of that and let it sit there for a few minutes before I pour in my equal parts of epoxy to mix up. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is when you think you're done mixing, mix some more. So I mix anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. If I am mixing larger batches of epoxy, I'm usually mixing for like 6 to 8 minutes when I'm using Artist Cure. And that just ensures that I have a really, really good mixed epoxy and that I don't run into an issue where my epoxy is not thoroughly mixed and I end up with a tacky tumbler. So once I'm done applying, of course, my epoxy coats, I We'll go over that with my torch. Make sure I've torched all of the bubbles, and then I'll come back and I like to switch the direction of my tumbler turners and then go ahead and remove the tape. And that is kind of it. So this was the first of second of 2 final coats. This will get 1 more final coat, and then of course here is the final look at the results. So I really loved how these came out. This was definitely different for me, not something that I've ever had or been able to make before, so it was delighted to be able to make these super cute little cups. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and of course if you did, give this video a huge thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!